spinning back to the open side. Karim Bete, up the goal here to Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Karim Bete. Back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby, we're the People's Podcast, providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. Match reviews, player interviews, quality rugby chat that is consistent and positive. We do it all for you, our dear listeners. I'm your host, Ando. With me is Mitch.
Yep. Hello. Hi, everyone. Nearly forgot to say hi there.
We've done this for how many years, and yet it's still awkward every single time. I think.
Well, it's because we're now on the video format. This is a nice little plug for YouTube. We're on the video format, and I was actually just really enjoying sitting here and watching Ando do the intro, and I sort of just got lost in your eyes, mate. So
fair enough, man. It's like me and Ryan want again every single week. Well, anyway, I'm Ando. That's Mitch, and tonight we are going to be covering some pretty exciting things tonight. So we're going to start off with a bit of who am I trivia or question. Mitch is going to be running this. I'm very scared because I always get nervous and a bit of stage fright with this, but we'll see how it goes. Following that, we're going to have a new segment for the week, which is called Fast Five, and we'll tell you more about that when we get to it. Before we go through our general thoughts for round one, talk about the match of the week, which turned out to be the Waratahs versus the Brumbies. So we're going to go through that in a lot more detail than some of the other games before we move to the locker room. Now, a couple of other things that we do need to talk about. We need to jump on to the tipping results for week one. So congratulations to everybody that got involved. It was absolutely fantastic. And we have Patrick with the team FARQS, who have a total points of 6.
Is it? That's what I read it as.
Maybe Far Queensland, perhaps. Who have total points of 6 with a margin of 9. So they're doing very well so far. Picked the closest result, particularly the margin was on the Crusaders Chiefs game, wasn't it? And so a lot of people would have got that game incorrect. So the fact that they've done quite well here is really impressive. Next up, we have Dan G with the team name Jojo Rabbit and Daniel T with the Gingers. All of them on 6 points. A few of them actually, Jack and Jared as well, all on 6 points, but with varying margins. So congratulations, Patrick, who is at the top of the table. And I know that you've got a lot of people hunting you down. So hopefully you can continue that lead. Now, jumping to a couple of other things before we get into the trivia, please do not forget to join us on our Discord channel. We have an awesome community of rugby fans, and we would love for you to join. Go to our link tree on any of our social medias, and you'll be able to find the code and the link to be able to get into the server. One of the really cool things that happened this weekend was just how we have a match thread for every single Super Rugby game across the weekend, and the amount of conversation and live discussion that was going on, but also the recaps at the end where everyone's kind of going through their expectations versus reality and why the result was the way it was. The chat went off, and the quality and the level of the conversation within those threads was amazing. So I very much encourage you to join us on Discord. And finally, thank you for those of you who have been helping to support the pod. If you would be interested in doing that, please consider going to ko-fi, coffee.com/pickanddriverugby and supporting us with a one-off or monthly payment. And that is it. Mitch, you're going to be taking us through Who Am I? So here, I'm going to throw it over to you. Let's go.
Well, actually, before we get into the Who Am I think we might just take a step back and just remind people of what we've been doing over the last few days and the last weekend, really, and what our kind of...
Put it in the run sheet. Put it in the run sheet.
I probably should have put it in the run sheet. Anyway, yes. we'll do this on the fly. But what we're doing things a little bit differently this year. 2023, new season, Super Rugby Pacific has kicked off. So if you haven't seen it already in your feed, we do have a podcast, a live reaction podcast. Actually, maybe it's not I guess we can call it a live reaction. It wasn't technically live, but it's a reaction podcast. So instant reaction, that's the word there. So we recorded that on Friday evening, late at night after the post-match press conferences and everything in Allianz Stadium. So if you want to hear what our just initial thoughts are from the game, reflecting a little bit on the performances of the players, but also talking a little bit around the press conferences and what the coaches both said, do go and follow that as well. So we're heading down this weekend to Super Round, and hopefully we can do something similar for that, for all the games that are played down there, particularly the Aussie games. And we're still in talks with the Waratahs, but we're hoping that we can get this access for the rest of the season and continue to bring that kind of content to you as well. If you have listened to it and you've got any thoughts or opinions, let us know. It's a bit of a work in progress at the moment. We will say that it probably wasn't the most conducive environment to record in, so we apologize if there is a little bit hard to hear at times.
It started off well,
nice
and then all
quiet.
the journos came back in and banging.
We tried to
and doors
beat the journos in. But yeah, there was a lot of background noise, so we will see if we can sort of steal into a side room or something next time and record in a quieter environment. But yeah, if you do want to hear our instant reactions and our instant thoughts from the games, do go ahead and listen to that, because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we found a couple of really good spaces nearby at Allianz that we can use that are kind of like padded booths for recording. So we'll make an effort to try and use them next week, and hope we don't get kicked out. And well, next game, I should say, next Sydney game that we're at. So either way, mate, it was really fun doing that live recording. Keen to instant reaction, I should say. Keen to keep them going. And what do we jump on now into the trivia?
Let's go. All right, it's time for our trivia segment this evening. Now, it's just you, Ando, so we're putting you on the spot. Let's normally we've done this in the past with a few other people, a guest or two, so no pressure tonight. It's just you flying solo, but we are doing a Who Am I segment. So this player, I will say to start with, this is Super Rugby, because it's Super Rugby Round 1 this week. It is sort of focused on that, and it is an Australian player. So I've got 4 questions. We have an additional 3 should we need it later on. If you know who it is, yell it out. You've got 2 guesses. You'll have 2 or 3 guesses, but we'll see how you go. So let's just get into it.
Okay.
And those playing along at home, let's see if you can get it faster than Ando. So first question. I was born in Saudi Arabia to Irish parents, arriving in Australia in 19...
Wait. I know.
Okay, well, that's a little bit fast there, Ando. That's a little bit premature. So let's just keep going for those at home and give them a little bit more of a chance to catch up. And then we'll see if you can do it once I answer these 4.
I've got a little card here. I'll write it down on here, and I won't show the screen. So I'll hold it like this, and I won't move it. And then when we've gone through some of the questions, I'll flip it over and you can see if I'm right.
All right, let's do that. All right, so I'll keep going.
All right.
So to recap, because you cut me off halfway through the question, born in Saudi Arabia to Irish parents, arriving in Australia in 1988, aged 5. I made my Super Rugby debut in 2003 against the Bulls. I made my Wallabies debut in 2005 against Samoa. I made my World Cup debut in 2007 against Japan. And the final question of this segment, I am the 3rd highest capped Super Rugby player of all time. Now, Ando, let's see if you can talk the talk, and let's see if you've got it right. Who do you think it is?
It might show up backwards. It might be reversed, but it is Stephen Moore.
It's not reversed. Well done. And it is. Congratulations. It is Stephen Moore.
Awesome.
How did you get that so quickly?
Saudi Arabia. I knew Saudi Arabia. And so I remember that just being a random fact about Squeak that was something that just stayed in my mind. So as soon as you said born in Saudi Arabia, I was like, game on. I know this one.
Well, I wasn't sure. That's like the either fact that will make it too obvious or not obvious enough. I mean, that could really throw you off course. So well done. You got that.
Great.
If anyone got that faster than Ando, which would be like within the first 2 words, 2-3 words of the first question, then you've done really, really well.
I'm pretty happy about that. So why don't we move on now to a new segment that we're trying for this week, which is called Fast 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm getting my phone out and I'm going to put a 5-minute timer on as soon as we get going. And what we're going to do is we have 5 minutes and 5 minutes only to debate the state of rugby or to sit on our pedestal and suggest what we think could be improved within a game of rugby. So tonight, there are 2 things that we're going to be talking about. Number 1, law variations. Number 2, the Waratahs matchday experience. Okay? So we don't have long.
Totally.
Any comment that you say has to be quick and has to be to the point. And if we go over 5 minutes, we lose. Okay? So
and then once that alarm goes off, we're off. It's done. We're on to the next segment.
We're cut off. Yeah, I'm cutting each other us off. So 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so the new law variations. Super Rugby this year started a whole series of innovations that are trying to speed up the game. They are 90-second limit for conversion, 60 seconds for penalty kicks, 30 seconds for scrums and lineouts, 5 seconds at rucks, so reducing caterpillar rucks, and getting rid of TMO intervention within play for when a red card is being deliberated. So when a yellow card is given, they're like, okay, cool, get off the field, here's a yellow card, and we'll figure out if it's red. How do you think it went this weekend?
Well, actually, one thing that we did learn from this weekend is the way that the referee actually adjudicates that yellow card. So I think we only saw that in the Chiefs and Crusaders game. So Ben O'Keefe, I think it was at the time, gave a yellow card. And so he gives the card and then he actually does like a cross arms and says, okay, that's now on review. And so that's the way that it's going to work. There was a few other instances. I think Sam Cane got a yellow card and it was just a straight out yellow card. He didn't give that.
Same like Seru Uru and Ryan Smith both got yellow cards, but they were straight yellows.
Yeah.
So how do you think it works?
It's interesting that I thought that, I mean, we only saw one, and just, I guess, across the round, the TMO interventions were minimal. There was, I can't even think, there was one from the Waratahs game that they pretty much stuffed up, but we'll talk about that later.
Yep.
But overall, I think in terms of the TMO intervention, it's a step in the right direction. We're not seeing them intervene as much, and we're not slowing down the game. I think one thing that I was expecting from the referees in this first round was to hear a little bit more through the communications of speeding teams up. There was certain times in certain games where I did definitely hear that, but I don't remember any like shot clocks being called at scrum time or lineouts. I don't think anyone was ever like pulled up for that. The only thing they were sort of adjudicating that area was kind of like no huddles before the scrum set. So
easy.
I think that's my
all right. That's you. You cut off. Now I want to say something. One of the things I think is that they need to make sure that they have some type of visual representation of that either at home, on the TV, on the live feed, or at the game. So if I, as a teacher, am able to put a freaking countdown timer in the bottom left of my screen whilst I'm showing stuff to students, I don't see why it's that hard to have a timer where the ref goes 60 seconds starts now, and a timer is just put onto the screen and they go. Not hard, keeps the fan engaged, and makes it really, really obvious to see when players are getting close to that limit. Now, the second thing we need to move to is the Waratahs match day experience. So both Mitch and I went to Allianz for the Waratahs Brumbies game, and I have to say, I really enjoyed it. It was a really good experience. The beer wasn't incredibly expensive. It was expensive, but I mean, it's Sydney at a stadium. And the food was really, really tasty, but was stupidly expensive. And so both Mitch and I were in the tar bar, which was where they had like standing tiers at one end of the stadium behind the goals.
They removed all the seats.
Yeah, removed all the seats, had room for people to stand, all the benches you could rest your butt on. Got to say, I really enjoyed it, but it needs to be improved. There wasn't any special crowd interaction. Most of it was filled with like mid-20 corporates who were just talking about their latest NFTs or crypto scams or upcoming AFL games and stuff like that. They were barely watching the match. Mitch and I and some drunk kid who was like 17, I don't know how he got in there, were the only ones actually cheering.
He was fun, though. He was great.
He was a lot of fun. But what do you think needs to change to make that a better crowd experience at the tar bar?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I said it on the night, like they need interaction, they need buy-in from the team. Like there was one point where the Waratahs scored a try off in the corner that was on the end of that tar bar, and the players like did their celebration and then like ran back up to halfway. It would be great to see them when they score that try to come into that section and really get involved, like the Highlanders tend to do in the zoo. And they just need to get it full. They just need to give tickets away for half price, a few bucks, get people in there, fill it up, have that atmosphere. I think one other thing, and I know the time is about to go off in a second, but we really need to get the TMO and the referee mic'd up in the stadiums. And I did notice it was happening in Townsville. So Angus Gardner was coming across to the PA system, but on the weekend, Nick Berry wasn't. And there was a few times where we had no idea what was going on because we couldn't hear it. So that's one thing that the Waratahs need to fix up.
Brilliant. And my couple of suggestions are, I mean, the Waratahs have a connection with UNSW. So I don't see why we're not giving out like 2-for-1 tickets to the tar bar to UNSW Sports Club members or something like that can guarantee that they can be there. Include a free drink per ticket within that, and you'll get uni students coming along without a doubt. And the Tars have so many people that are involved in like those halftime shows that they just need to employ a couple of people to be the hype squad squad for the game to help get people to be cheering and riling up the crowd. So that's my thoughts. 5 minutes done. Time is up. And
there we go. We're done. I will just say, whilst we move on now, for those that don't know, and I think this was something that was sort of organised last minute, and with the first game of the round, so the Waratahs were sort of pushing sales, and a lot of people went out and bought tickets early. But for next time, you can actually get a ticket to Tarbar for $40, which includes 2 beers. So, I mean, we don't encourage drinking at all, but if you want to sit in Tarbar, if you want that, experience or that atmosphere, then that's a great option there that's available that may not be so widely known.
Definitely.
Let's go.
Well, mate,
Let's keep moving
match of the week
along. And we'll do match of the week. So we will first run through the results for Super Rugby Pacific Round 1. And then what we've done this year and what we're doing a little bit differently, if you check our socials, we put it out on Instagram, we put it out on Twitter. I think it was also on Facebook. I'm not too sure. But we're asking you your opinion on the match of the round. We focus on the Australian teams. We're an Australian podcast. So this week we will do quick fire, really, really quick, just a few comments from some of the games that happened for the first round, and then we will go into depth and we'll focus on the Waratahs and Brumbies game. Now, we are Waratahs fans, and that's not just us choosing to do that. We put the call out. We asked you which game you wanted us to talk about, and that's why we're talking about the Waratahs. So don't hit us with your hate. It's your choice. And if you want to hear about another game in future weeks, get on the socials and make your voice heard. Anyway, without that, the first results from round 1. So a few upsets here. Number 1, the biggest upset, which I honestly did not see coming. I don't think anyone did. Chiefs 31, Crusaders 10. What happened, Ando?
Mate, it was absolutely amazing. The second half, the Chiefs just ran absolute riot. The Crusaders were in the game quite well. I think they got up to a 10 lead, and then it was a 31 points unanswered to the Chiefs. And just to make it really clear, this was the Crusaders playing at home. Now, to have the tournament favourites and champions from 2022 knocked off in such a convincing fashion is really surprising. It puts that old saying of the Crusaders start slowly every Super Rugby season back into the picture, because it's sometimes like a bit of a lazy trope or a lazy commentator's statement to be putting out there. Yet I wonder if there's some element to it. This wasn't a weak Crusaders team by any stretch of the imagination, but the Chiefs just took it to them. Their dynamism in the physical contact areas, their ability to exploit mistakes from the Crusaders, particularly off multi-phase opportunities, was just really, really impressive. So the Chiefs were excellent for the win, and they're going to be really, really dangerous moving forward.
Yeah, they are. We'll move through the rest of the results, and then we might talk about 1 or 2 key thoughts of the round, and then we'll move into our match of the week. So Waratahs, Brumbies, 31-25 to the Brumbies in that one. Moana Pacifica and Fijian Indrua, 36-34 to the Indrua. That's a fantastic game, just going to say. If you haven't seen it, definitely get into the Stan Sport Mini, because that was just non-stop the whole game. Highlanders and Blues, 60-20 to the Blues. Massive dominant performance there by the Auckland Blues. We then had the Reds and the Hurricanes in Townsville. Hurricanes coming away 47-13 victors there. And in the final game of the week, the grudge match of Australian rugby, Western Force and Melbourne Rebels, 34-27 to the Western Force. Ando, where do you want to start? We'll keep this quick, but what do you want to talk about? What are your
Let's just go down the list, and we'll start with Moana Drua. As Mitch mentioned, if you have the opportunity to watch the full game or even just the mini, do it. It was an incredibly entertaining game. Drua stealing the win right at the end of the match. Incredible, again, physicality, but particularly skill and handling, as you would expect. Some just wonderful play from both teams, highly entertaining and well done to both of them for the result. So, yep, really recommend that. And then the Highlanders versus the Blues. That was an outrageous blowout from the Blues. Mark Talea had a stupid amount of points for, I think, Joey in our fantasy competition, like 127 points or something like that. He had over 200.
We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it.
He had over 200 run meters. 2 tries, 13 defenders beaten, just insane statistics. And it really shows that the Highlanders may well be the whipping boys of New Zealand's side of the competition. Hopefully things can turn around for them pretty quickly. And I'll let you go on to talk briefly about the other 2 games.
Yeah, so Moana Pacifica and the Fijian Drua, that was just non-stop from the get-go. Like that, the score changed hands a number of times. Like both teams were just willing to run the ball from anywhere. I think there was like 6 or 7 penalties, but both teams got. And instead of like kicking it to set piece, taking the scrum, they just took a quick tap and kept going. Like the Indrua were definitely there to play rugby, and they were there to kind of keep that tempo going. And Moana held it with them. Like when you think of the performance last year with the Indrua and Moana Pacifica out at, I think it was Combank Stadium in Parramatta, that game was pretty much like run away with by the Drua. Moana were making mistakes and the Drua were just capitalizing. But this game, Moana got out early and were really looking quite dominant, but the Drua kept their heads down, clawed their way back, and then ended up scoring in like the second last play of the game to go ahead and to eventually win it. So fantastic game there, and a lot of physicality, a lot of just free-flowing rugby. So do definitely get around if you haven't seen it yet.
Brilliant. All right. Well, touching then just briefly on the Reds Hurricanes, that was just really disappointing from the Reds. In many ways, it was a bit of a capitulation. Some of the mistakes that they made throughout the game were just really poor, weak defense around the ruck, getting bullied, which is something that you don't really see that often from the Reds. Their forward pack just really, really struggled. So the Hurricanes were deserved winners there, particularly again within the second half blowout that occurred. And in Western Force and the Rebels was definitely a physical and willing encounter from both teams. A few injuries coming out from particularly the Western Force. Had a couple of players go down injured. I think Sam Spink might have done his hammy in a half break that he was on, which is rough for the 13 position considering the lack of depth at 13 that the Force have. But yeah, watching the game back, I enjoyed it. It probably didn't have the same consistently high quality as some of the other games throughout the weekend, but it was definitely a close match with both teams throwing everything at it, and it was enjoyable because of that, because of the tension within the game.
I've got to say, just like to sum up Super Rugby Pacific Round 1, what's going on with the team sheets? This weekend we had like
Jeremy
out of
Thrush
the, what is it,
playing
1,
for the
2, 3,
Force.
4, 5, 6 games that were played. I think 4 of them at least had players in the starting team, if not the full 23, that weren't either named in the squad to start with, who weren't even named in the squad to start the season. Jeremy Thrush gets pulled in. Tom Horton gets pulled in for the Force. John Alugia gets pulled in. 2 of those guys were retired. What is going on?
Look, it's definitely concerning. And the weirdest thing was to have Jeremy Thrush take the field without his handlebar moustache. I don't like it. I don't want to see it again. If he has to take the field, he's got to grow that back quickly or wear a fake. Okay, so that's my expectations moving forward.
Just wear a fake, like glue it on, because
glue it on and just replace it.
Anyway, I think we've spoken enough around the results this week. I will just say quickly on the Reds and the Hurricanes game, discipline really hurt them. The Hurricanes really took advantage when the Reds went down a man. Then in the second half, they were down a man for 20 minutes. So the Reds need to be better in that regard. They can't let the teams in and get easy points by giving away those penalties and giving away those silly things. And some of those, I think, Ryan Smith's yellow card was just really, really dumb. So that's something that Brad Thorne definitely can fix up and will be working on this week. But geez, it doesn't get much easier for the Reds moving forward. Let's move now into our match of the week. And you've chosen the Waratahs and the Brumbies, probably because you just want to hear us cry about how the Waratahs lost and we were all expecting them to win. Ando, where do you want to start with this one?
We'll start at a really easy thing that just shows how gracious we are as Waratahs fans. Corey Toole definitely did not step out, and his try should have stood. So the Brumbies should have been up at least another 5 points in my mind. So that's just something I wanted to put out there. And even in the post-match presser, Stephen Larkin was like, "Come on, you guys are Tars fans. Did his foot go out?" And we're like, "No, it should have been a try. It should have been a try."
Yeah, I mean, this was an interesting game for the Waratahs. It's something that Darren Coleman has been preparing for all preseason. He's put a lot of emphasis on turning up, filling the stadium, This is their homecoming to Allianz, the new home of the Waratahs, and putting in a good performance that's going to bring the crowds, get people energized and interested back in the sport of rugby union in New South Wales, and give them a reason to want to come back later in the season. Now, the players, it's kind of, where do we go with this? Like, they didn't play badly by any means. Like, it wasn't a bad game. The Waratahs were very physical. They were in it till the end. They kept pushing the Brumbies, but just some of the simple things, the handling, pushing the passes, and kind of at the set piece as well, they kind of were just let down in some of the simple areas, which Darren Coleman definitely was a bit of a shadow of a man in that press conference after the game.
Yeah, there were a few areas that I think were really important. We didn't touch much about this in our instant reaction pod, but I think they got the back row balance wrong. So starting with Hooper, Gamble, and Swinton, I don't think worked well. None of them are renowned ball carriers, and you really need somebody, particularly now with Angus Bell out for potentially the rest of the year, definitely trying to make it back for the World Cup, but he's going to be touch and go now that he's re-injured his big toe, as a matter of fact.
The ligament.
Yeah, the ligament in his toe. We need to have Harris or Gleeson starting. One of those needs to be the starting 8. And so I think we probably lose Swinton, maybe have him on the bench, and then, or maybe not even on the bench. Anyway, but either way, we need to start with Harris or I'm having a mental blank. I just said his name a second ago.
Swinton.
I love how this happens. No, the other number 8, Gleeson, Langy Gleeson. How does that happen?
Oh, Gleeson. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the 6 jersey. Keep going.
Well, yeah. So I think we need to change that. Having Bell gone is going to be really, really difficult. But just sticking on this game, it was a lack of incisive forward carries that was really the problem. One of the things I noticed for the first try to the Brumbies, it came after the Brumbies had received or taken a line out on exactly on the halfway line, and then they just had this immense amount of phase play just going left to right across the field, where the accuracy of their ruck work meant that the Tars just weren't able to get onto the ball. They weren't even able to get any dominant hits on in defense. And what that did was it tired out the Tars defense until, Wright's break on the left-hand side of the field when he makes that half break and then he's able to offload it to Lonergan, who goes in for the try. Yep. That half break comes because Teleni Siu is too slow to get up from a previous ruck after making a tackle. He's got his back to the play as he enters the defensive line, but Edmed thinks Siu on his inside has Wright, and so Edmed starts tracking the man on the out in case the ball goes out, assuming that Siu's got it on the inside, and Siu doesn't reload. And how does that happen? That happens because Siu has been forced into that error by fatigue, because it's his first Super Rugby game. He's fatigued, and the Brumbies have been able to manipulate the defense to isolate a weakness like that. And so the Tars just need to get better at enforcing themselves upon the rucks and slowing down and breaking up that play. Otherwise, that's going to keep on happening.
I mean, like, the Brumbies perform really well at the breakdown. It was kind of puzzling in some ways, listening to the way that the Waratahs players were talking in the press conference. Like, Jake Gordon and Jed Holloway both did interviews after the game, and they were sort of saying, like, Lord Laurie, we've worked with him under the Wallabies. He's got such an emphasis on the breakdown, flooding the breakdown, being really clinical, making sure you're actually hands on ball, not hands on ground, and that sort of thing. Like, they spoke about that they were expecting it, yet they didn't seem to be able to counteract it on the field, and they didn't seem to, they looked like they were a bit shocked with the way that the Brumbies were attacking the breakdown so heavily, and they just weren't fast enough to kind of get over the ball and secure their own ball, and the Brumbies were just so clinical at that area. They had their hands on the ball like 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, they were just really impressive. So in my mind, for this game, it was a case of a lack of ruck dominance and forward dominance that cost it for the Waratahs against a quality Brumbies team. They were able to exploit the mistakes that they manufactured from their own quality of play.
And we've got to talk a little bit about the Brumbies now. They played really well. They manufactured a lot, and they definitely highlighted the Waratahs' weaknesses in those areas, like you highlighted before. Just hitting men when they're sort of out of shape, and pulling players across the field and creating gaps when the Waratahs were sort of starting to slow down or starting to tire. the Brumbies were able to sort of up the tempo and play a faster game of rugby. One thing that we've come to expect from the Brumbies over the last few years is a really forward dominant, set piece heavy game. I don't know if necessarily it was the way this game was refereed, but either team really, were able to get dominance at the breakdown at the set piece. The scrums and the lineouts were a bit of a free for all both ways. There was penalties and free kicks given out a lot. There were some injury concerns for the Brumbies as well. So McInerney went off early with a HIA, which meant that John Alugia had to come on, who has only been with the squad for a week and a half, 2 weeks or something.
2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, coming in and played like 76 minutes or something, or nearly 70 minutes. So big performance from him. And yeah, just it'd be interesting to see how both teams sort of take their learnings from this game and move and use that moving forward.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think the Brumbies are going to have a really, really impressive week this week in that they're going up against the Blues. And so it's going to be a real litmus test of the quality this early on in the season, considering some of the injury concerns that they do have. Really hoping that Lachie Lonergan is able to be back, because as good as John Alugia was within his enforced entry into the game, I'm not convinced that he's going to be up to the pace and a standard of playing against the Blues, who, like we mentioned earlier, put on an absolute masterclass against the Highlanders. They were just incredible. They were just brilliant. And so the Brumbies are going to be thanking their lucky stars that they're actually playing this away game down in Melbourne. So that's really important for them. It's not home ground for either team, but I mean, the Blues have to travel further, and so there's that element to it. It just means that home ground advantage that the Blues would have is negated, and so the odds would be a bit more in the Brumbies' favour than if they hadn't been. The Tars have a pretty challenging match coming up, so I've just lost the page. Who are the Tars playing this week?
Yeah, they're playing the Indrua.
There we go. Thank you.
They're playing Indrua on Saturday night for Super Round. So we saw from the Indrua in their first game against Moana this week that they really wanted to play up-tempo, physical, fast. The Waratahs at times this week looked like they struggled a little bit to keep up with the Brumbies at times, like we mentioned before. So the Waratahs, I think, will definitely be working on that this week and making sure that they hit and they stick, because these guys are big bodies and they're going to keep that ball flowing whenever they can.
Yeah, I think one of the players, since we're still talking about the Tars, one of the players that really struggled this week was Tane Edmed with his defensive responsibilities. I went back through and watched big chunks of the game this evening in preparation for this. And not every try, but there were 2 or 3 tries that were partly down to his missed tackles. So Bobby Valentini's try where Corey Toole flicks it back in on the outside into Bobby Valentini. That break comes from a missed tackle by Tane Edmed. I also spoke about that earlier one that enabled Wright to have his break and pass inside to Lonergan. And there were a couple of others where Edmed struggled with the defensive duties, particularly on the short side, as players were coming back, as the player was coming back and targeting that short side. So he's not normally weak with an tackle. He's not normally someone that has kind of defensive frailties. So I'm pretty confident that he's going to be able to take on this experience and maybe be better for it. But the other thing I did notice just quickly, Fekete, the second time I watched it through, Fekete was massive. I didn't notice it at the game, which is why I didn't talk him up in the instant reaction pod. But Fekete was really, really important. He was basically the center of nearly everything that the Waratahs did that was good on attack. So as much as it might be get the ball into the hands of Ndolo or Jorgensen or Nwanganituase, like Fekete is just so important to breaking the line and being that central body in attack for the Tars.
Yeah, when I went back and watched the game, it was interesting. If you haven't seen it, the Stan Sport had the player cam going. I didn't know until I got home and the next day I was watching it. So they had it on Ben Donaldson at fullback. And watching some of his involvement, it was actually quite weird because they had a really tight camera on Ben Donaldson for the whole game. So you can't really actually see what he's doing or kind of where he's positioned. He's sort of just standing around a lot of the time watching, which in some ways made it feel like he wasn't doing a whole lot. But when you actually watch the replays, he was. But one thing that I sort of thought about coming out of the game was I feel like the balance is still a little bit off with the Waratahs. That axis of Ben Donaldson and Tane Edmed was so good last season, but I don't think they've sort of hit their straps there like we expected them to. Donaldson didn't have as many involvements as we kind of were hoping from fullback. And as you said, in defense, Edmed was falling off a few tackles and wasn't quite getting up for it either. So I don't know what the Waratahs do moving forward because we don't really have much other options there. I think it's too early in the season to shift Jorgensen back to fullback, particularly with some Fijians running at him as the last line of defense. But for whatever reason, they both just didn't seem to be 100% on this week. I guess that goes across the whole Waratahs team. That in some ways, I feel like DC maybe hyped this game up just that little bit too much. There was a lot of expectation, a lot of sort of nerves, new season, new home. Everyone's talking about the Waratahs being a top 4 team, potentially winning it like this is the year of the Tar. So now that they have lost that first one, I am worried that they may not be able to get back up and bounce back as quickly as we might be hoping. And moving forward into Super Round this week, if Fiji come out firing and put a few early tries on, geez, I don't know. I'm hoping we can match them in that, but I would hate for us to lose to Fiji as well.
Yep. Well, mate, we're just going to have to see how that one turns out because both you and I are going to be down in Melbourne for that game. So very, very excited. And if anybody is wanting to catch up and grab a beer, then we'd be more than happy to say g'day. But I think that's probably it for the match of the week, mate. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we move on?
I mean, we've sort of spoken about them, but both Corey Toole and Max Jorgensen for the Waratahs, both immense on debut, and they're both players with huge futures. I just kind of wanted to get on here and say, like, let's just cool our jets, everyone. There's a lot of people talking about like Wallaby selections, bolters for World Cup, all this sort of stuff. Like Toole is in a better position because he's a little bit older. He's got 7s, but Jorgensen is literally 19. He's right out of high school. Yes, he had a great game.
He's 18.
18. Yes, he had a great game. He had great involvement. He scored 2 beautiful tries, but let's not put too much pressure on this bloke. Let's just see how they go. Give them time to develop. Corey Toole, exciting. Really looking forward to seeing what both of these guys can bring in Super Rugby Pacific this year. But just remember, they played Australian teams. Let's see how they go against the Kiwis in a few weeks.
And I think it's almost cheap journalism to just be like, oh, a young kid had a good game. He's going to be a Wallabies bolter moving forward. To me, it's just too easy. It's just too easy. You had Morgs always say you need to have a body of work. You need to have a body of work for a player to get picked for the Wallabies. And that's just it. I mean, there's no way that Toole and Jorgensen, you know what, there's no way that Jorgensen is anywhere near it. And Toole, just because of his 7s, maybe if he has the best season ever and Nwangani Shawase and Wright and Kellaway all like fall off a cliff or something, then he'll be in the picture. But yep. Basically, I think it's just cheap. It's just cheap journalism, getting a few clicks here and there to get people involved. And you know what? Maybe it's a good news story, and people need a good news story sometimes. But it's not a really good reflection of reality in my mind.
All right, perfect. I think that's enough for this match of the week. Shall we move into the locker room now?
Yep, let's do it, mate. Keen. All right, we move to the final segment of tonight's podcast, which is the locker room, where you get involved and send in your fan questions and comments. And first up, we have a bit of a list of players who stood up this weekend from Thallium, who is a fan from WA. So many players stood up this weekend, but some to mention aren't the young bolters that have been plastered everywhere. Hamish Stewart, Richard Hardwick, Brad Wilkin, Bryce Hegarty, Isaac Funds, Leleoasa, Tom Horton, Tom Robertson, Ikitau, Feketi, Pataya, Ioane, and Gordon. So there was a lot of players there that did get deserved raps. He does notice that he has force-coloured glasses. Of those players who he has mentioned, Mitch, pick 2 that you think were real standouts and you want to just quickly speak to.
I've actually got one that's not included in this list. Does that count or not?
No. Got to be this, and then afterwards, once I've said my piece, you can come back in.
Oh, okay. I'll go with Stewart, and who else did I think perform well? Actually, no. I'll scratch Stewart. I'll go with Hegarty at 10 for the Western Force. I thought he had a great game, And I will go with Tom Horton. Why not? I didn't know that bloke was still hanging around Super Rugby, and the fact that when I saw him show up and in Force colours, I was really surprised, and he performed quite well.
Yeah, completely fair enough. For me, it's Dickie Hardwick and Brad Wilkin. So Brad Wilkin being the captain of the Rebels within this game, Richard Hardwick playing at number 8. I wasn't sure he'd be able to do it, but as usual, he'd taken his angry pills, and it must have been a new batch or something, because he was off the charts with his physicality and controlled aggression. He went redder than a tomato, probably redder than a beetroot, and he was just absolutely a monster in the way that he was trying to
Sure, it wasn't
impose
just the red
himself
jersey he was
on the
wearing.
game.
But,
Maybe
like,
they melded together or something like that.
Yeah.
But he was excellent, and Wilkin just continues to get better and better. So really, really impressed with those two. Who was the player that you were thinking of that wasn't on his list?
Tom Liner, I thought, for the Reds. Like, geez, tough debut. Yeah, you're coming in to steer a ship around and to be the sort of face of a young Reds team. Your debut, you're only, what is he, 19, 20 maybe? So young. Look, the result wasn't there for him, unfortunately, but he had some great involvements, and he definitely didn't look out of place against the Kiwi sides, which is massive.
Yep. Andy has got in touch saying player of the round is John Elugia, and we mentioned him before in terms of the quality of his performance for the Brumbies, which was fantastic. Craig at Balumba has said, all in all, as expected, apart from the Reds blowout for Australia, I would have expected a HC with 4 seasons would not be in
Head
this
coach.
position. So head coach with 4 seasons wouldn't be in this position, which is fair enough. It's an important question to ask. And also, I think it feeds back into the broader organizational level roster management that we'd spoken about in the preseason podcast. So anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? Like, they've lost some key players in that Reds team, and when they get their full 23 back, I think they'll go a little bit better. They're lacking a bit of leadership at the moment, and just discipline. Like, when they give away those silly penalties and those yellow cards, it's against a team like the Hurricanes. They're going to score points, and yeah, you got to be up for so long. For such a young team, it's a big ask.
Yep, definitely. All right, that rugby fella's got in touch asking, put on your coaching hat, stocks rising for Eddie and stocks falling for Eddie based on round 1 performance. I'm going to go with stocks rising and say Tom Wright at 15 and Jordan Petaia at 15. I thought both of them, particularly Wright, were pretty strong at 15 in both of their games. And so considering that's a trouble position for the Wallabies, Eddie Jones will have been happy to see those two putting their hands up. What about you? Any players rising or falling?
We'll have to say, unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say, Angus Bell stock's falling. It's just such disappointing for the bloke that he's going to be out for the whole season now. Well, Super Rugby particularly. If he gets himself right, we know what he can do. It's about what Eddie Jones knows what he can do. So even if he doesn't get a full season, there's no guarantee that he's still going to make, like, he gets his body right. There's no guarantee that Eddie Jones is going to pick him for those tests early. And geez, we don't want him to form into that Taniela Tupou form player either, in terms of he's off with an injury, he comes back, gets injured again, and then he's now off for nearly 2 seasons. So let's hope that he can get his body right and can have that impact. But it's a big ask to see if he will feature for the Wallabies again this year.
Fair enough. Jock Cudmore, plenty said about Jorgensen and Toole being smokies to the Wallaby squad, despite it being 1 game into the season, so very early to be making claims. But conversely, who's playing themselves out of contention? Didn't think Paisami made a good account of himself. I would agree. I don't think Hunter was particularly good. I don't think Tate McDermott was particularly good either for the Reds, mostly because he's going up against my boys Jake and Ryan Lonergan as well. Just by the way, Ryan Lonergan, genuine bolter for the World Cup squad. Well, not bolter, he's kind of the 4th in line, but he could be a chance if he wasn't so similar to Nick White. Who do you think?
Yeah, I think like Ryan Lonergan sort of slots into that position with Jake Gordon, doesn't he? With a new coach, with the amount of experience both of those players have now, Ryan Lonergan is a captain in his own right as well as Jake Gordon. So I kind of see Eddie Jones could very well shift to favouring Ryan Lonergan and use him as his sort of replacement scrum half moving forward now. That's not just going to make the World Cup in this end of this year, 2023, but he'll see through into once Nick White finishes up and all that sort of thing. So it'd be really interesting to see how Jake Gordon and Ryan Lonergan sort of battle it out this year.
Yeah, and in terms of players who are playing themselves out of contention, obviously this is one game, but who do you think didn't put their hand up particularly well?
Look, we're a positive podcast, so trying to be positive. I don't actually have anyone that jumps to mind as playing like atrociously who's ruled themselves out this early on.
Yeah. Let's move on. That's okay. So as a non-biased Waratahs fans are, Rugby Fella is asking, was Tool's foot in touch? We've already mentioned it. No.
Well, I didn't put it on there, but I respond to this that he was so far in touch that he was sitting in the front row. So yes.
Well, mate, that's where we're going to end it with the locker room. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for getting your questions and comments in. It's been a lot of fun. Mitch, this has been good, mate. I think we're going to have finished in record time. How crazy is that?
We're being short, sharp, and punchy this year. We've spoken about it in the past of, this is going to be a quick pod, and it never is. So new format, new year. If you didn't answer the trivia question so quickly, we might have been able to get to this even faster. But hopefully the fans at home were able to answer the questions as well.
Well, mate, it's been a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this podcast. Thanks for joining us on YouTube as well, because all of these are also going out on YouTube, so you can get your visual elements there too. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week, and we can't wait to maybe meet you, or at least be providing you with more fantastic content down at Super Round in Melbourne. So have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.